Content warning. This video and the game being shown contain references to a real-life terrorist attack that occurred in 2017, such as a news broadcast of the aftermath of the event. Viewer discretion is advised. And with that, we have our first game that toes the line between the virtual and the real, and that will pose the uncomfortable question: how do you feel about playing a character that was a mass murderer in real life? My name is Graeldon, and I'm reviewing Steam games in alphabetical order to find the hidden gems among the piles of garbage, and today's game is 0304. Let's begin. Today's video begins with a history lesson. No, don't click away, I promise I'll keep it brief. The 3rd of April 2017 was a special day for everyone living in St. Petersburg, Russia, because Vladimir Putin himself had come to visit the city. This of course meant that everyone was up early in order to be good citizens and arrive at work on time, because otherwise they might be disappeared. On this otherwise lovely morning, a train was travelling between Technologichesky Institute and Senaya Ploshad, two places that I've probably horrendously mispronounced, when a suicide bomber detonated approximately 230 grams, or roughly half a pound, of explosives. As a result, 15 people lost their lives and at least 45 others were wounded. This number would have been higher if the second bomb that was left in a briefcase on another train had not been found and disarmed in time. Almost 2 years later, JPEG of Pain Games releases a game onto Steam where you play as this suicide bomber, but maybe not in the way you think. Welcome to 0304. A game where you play as the St. Petersburg bomber immediately after these events as he awakens in purgatory and begins a journey through his twisted mind as he attempts to overcome trials and atone for his sins. If you decided at this point to blacklist this game forever and never pick it up, I wouldn't blame you one bit. There's something unnerving about playing not just as a person that actually lived fairly recently, but was also a horrible person, and we're meant to guide them on a journey of redemption. Does this person even deserve redemption? Surely the best thing to do would be to load up the game, put them in purgatory, and then leave them there. Well, for the sake of science, I decided to dive in, because although the internet is full of trolls, surely if the game was some sort of praise for this monster, it wouldn't have a very positive rating, right? So let's take a look to see if 0304 is worth your time. And of course, be warned, plenty of spoilers ahead. We start, of course, with the main menu. Upon starting the game, there's a nicely stylized logo and title reveal that the 027 dev could really take lessons from, followed by a frankly unnecessary screen that for once actually requires the button prompt on screen, and then we're at the main menu. And it's surprisingly good. There's a scene that sets the mood of what to expect in the game. It's dark and gloomy, a train occasionally races past in the background, and in the foreground we see a phone, a pistol, and a knife, presumably the weapons we'll be using in the game. The graphics do look pretty muddy though, but heading into the graphics settings reveals that the game defaults to the lowest setting, so bumping up the textures and lighting effects makes a pretty noticeable difference. It's still not amazing, but it looks like an acceptable early 2000s game. Shame this was released in 2017. There's also a solid range of audio sliders and a control section, but sadly nothing is rebindable, so they lose a few marks there. All in all, it's pretty reasonable, and if anything, at the high end of the scale for games seen on this channel. A-. Maybe we just start a main menu tier list. Whatever ends up on the list, Doki Doki Family will always be the benchmark for an F tier. Anyway, while 027 was a horror/puzzle hybrid game, 0304 focuses on the horror elements with some mild first-person shooter mechanics on the side. The game begins with the player waking up in a foggy field with nothing but a knife and a mobile phone that must have magical powers or something, because not only does it work in other dimensions, it also somehow gets reception in the depths of a concrete bunker. It's probably just as well, because this phone will be your only companion on your journey through purgatory, receiving messages from an unknown person that seems to know everything about your past life, and will guide you through your trials of redemption with broken English that I can't judge too harshly because it was likely translated from Russian. It's a bit janky, but not so broken that you can't piece together what the plot is. But some messages might leave you scratching your head a bit. The game takes place in 3 acts, with the bunker acting as a sub-area that you will revisit in between the main story-focused sections. Slowly creeping your way through the bunker in the dark, with nothing but a phone flashlight as your source of illumination, is a tense experience, and the combination of the lighting and sound design do a lot of the heavy lifting to create a feeling of unease and suspense in this early area. Again, the 027 dev should be taking notes from this area, because it very quickly evokes feelings that 027 failed at. As you explore deeper and deeper into the bunker, you'll be tasked with finding a way to turn the lights back on and then eventually exiting. It's here that you'll find your first weapon, the pistol, as well as your first suitably horrifying enemy. And it's at this point that I'd like to mention that with the exception of the health and sprint meters in the lower left, this game basically avoids using a HUD for the majority of the game. For example, if you want to check how much ammo you have, you need to hold Q to inspect your gun, which will play a neat animation that shows your remaining bullets. Just don't do this in combat or you'll have a bad time. Unfortunately, this is around where the positives end. Don't get me wrong, the vast majority of the game is perfectly competent, but I feel compelled to point out some design flaws that show themselves pretty early on. Firstly, the approach to the UI. If you have a keen eye, you may have noticed that there is no central crosshair. This makes exploring and gunplay more immersive, but makes trying to pick up small items like ammunition or keys an absolute nightmare. If you're going to take away my ability to tell where I'm looking, at least make close enough good enough for object interaction. Secondly, while the monster design is generally quite good, there are only 4 different enemies you'll find in the game. The walkers, the crawlers, the spike stilts, and the tanky boys. The models are fairly detailed in an appropriately gruesome way, however, at least as far as I could tell, there isn't any noticeable difference between the models, which means you'll be seeing the same enemies again and again and again. And for all the work they've done to make the game more immersive, that breaks pretty quickly when a corpse despawns right in front of your eyes. At least make it vanish after I've moved on to another area or something. And lastly, although the textures are looking a bit dated, the lighting generally makes up for it, and I wouldn't call this a bad looking game overall. Except for the stupidly low resolution and out of place piles of rubble. Like, come on, were you even trying? There's a few more issues to discuss, but let's get back to the gameplay for a moment. As I said, the story is broken into 3 sections. The first takes place in an abandoned school, which is appropriately decrepit and falling apart through disuse. There are some good jump scares here, such as when a monster sneaks up behind you after entering a room, or when a PA system suddenly jumps to life and attracts the attention of all the nearby nightmares. Sadly, these also become a recurring trope within the game, leading to a lot of these ambushes feeling predictable. After the first few times, you learn that almost every time you go down a dead end to find an item, you'll be ambushed as soon as you pick it up. And that predictability destroys a lot of the tension that the game is working to create. It's also worth mentioning that it's in this school that you'll encounter an active computer that's playing footage from a news broadcast of the St. Petersburg metro attack covering the aftermath of the bombing. This plays on repeat, and it's extremely unsettling to be watching real-life TV footage inside a game, showing the events after the actions of the character you're controlling. The story that's told through the text messages is that you were a liar and a thief in school, stealing from others, and your punishment, your first step of atoning for the sins of your past, is to use your knife to cut off your own hand. Yeah. What I find particularly interesting about this is that the history of the suicide bomber is actually unknown. We know little more about the person than their name, when they arrived in the city, and the jobs they held. So this event, and the next one as well, are entirely fictional, which I think is the justification for the note on the Steam store page that reads, "The game was not intended to offend or offend anyone. Everything shown in 0304 is a figment of the imagination. All the similarities with reality are random." It's definitely bending the definition of things. I think "we've taken artistic liberties with the story" might be more accurate. After another brief bunker visit, you'll wind up in an apartment building, navigating tight hallways, scaffolding in the rain, gore-filled rooms, and then eventually climb up to the rooftop. The accusation here is that you had a girlfriend that you lied to, cheated on, and possibly worse, driving them to suicide. So, your punishment is to jump off the building yourself. Which, honestly, feels like a cop-out. After another visit to the bunker, you arrive at the final level, the train station. I won't say too much here, other than that with the exception of a section that is blocked off with a poisonous fog, you've seen everything the game can throw at you by this point. The result is that the game loses its edge, because it's become predictable. Don't get me wrong, the atmosphere and the tension are still there, because you're always scrambling to find more ammunition to be able to survive the next fight, and in all fairness, they've balanced that scarcity rather well. After completing the objectives, you finally have a chance to leave. You've atoned for your sins. But, as the player walks towards the light, symbolising their literal and figurative escape, the game fades to black and a final cutscene plays, where it's revealed that this character is actually in an endless loop, forced to experience these horrors forever and ever. And we've just been here to witness one loop. For this person, there is no escape. And to that, I say, good. So, we can definitively say that the game is meant to be a damning commentary on the St. Petersburg bomber, and honestly, thank goodness for that. Oh, if you skipped here, apologies, I can't explain why without ruining things, so you'll just have to trust me on that. That said, here's what I don't understand about the messaging of the game. Why purgatory? Purgatory is meant to be the plane of existence between heaven and hell, where souls are weighed and tested to decide where they truly belong. So by sending the player character here, it implies that there was a level of good inside them that balanced out the evil of their actions. Sure, there is no escape and they're forced to relive and repeat some pretty horrific tasks, but compared to an eternity in a literal hell, yeah, come on, who are you kidding? I'm sure it's not their intent, but they've perhaps unwittingly created a message that seems to go against the very purpose of the game itself, which was to send a message that the suicide bomber, the person responsible for ending the lives of 15 people in an instant, that they would never be forgiven. That they should be forced to suffer for eternity. Surely an eternity in hell is the more fitting end then. Messaging aside, the rest of the game is just average at best. Some aspects like the ambience and the atmosphere are great. Other aspects like the gunplay, horror elements and the immersive UI are nothing special to write home about. There's nothing inherently bad here, and the fact that it's free does give it some bonus points. If you're on a tight budget and wanting a 2 to 3 hour horror experience, it's not a bad option. And it's for those reasons that my final rating is a pile of rubble out of 10. It looks and feels out of place, and what it shows will be a problem for some and a non-issue for others. I recommend it, but with a content warning. Thanks for watching. Welcome to the end of the video. Massive thank you to all the channel members on screen for supporting the channel, with a special shout out to our noble knights Negi Malevolent, Lampyrides, Zest, Theo the Cat Guy and Azazel, and an extra special thank you to our 2 Knights of the Holy Grail, Freaky Feline and Loveheart Gonzi. You too can become a member for as little as 25% of your soul, so why not? You've got plenty to spare. And lastly, thank you for joining me on this weird gaming adventure through the depths of Steam, and I'll see you next time in a multiplayer game. Until then, take care.